Because the reason that union will hold a place with God is because there is a heritage that should be transferred. There's an agenda that should be transferred. But you see, today, people don't care about divine agenda anymore. Well, in fact, there are places where people get married and they say, we don't want children. We just want to love ourselves, live together, and keep ourselves company. Because they think it's all about their emotions. They think it's all about themselves. And so when emotion is no longer working, they cut off and look for another person that they can breed emotion. But when God was creating this institution, he wanted a channel through which he can transfer agenda. He can transfer purpose. He can transfer ordination. And the only way ordination can be transferred is if life keep being replicated. And marriage became one of the bases through which God can keep replicating life. The reason Jesus can be traced to Abraham is marriage. Now, if Adam did not have the capacity to procreate, then Jesus would have appeared on the street and say, I am Jesus. All of us were wrong. But the reason Jesus did not appear was because God kept marking that track, and God kept watching that lineage, and he watched it from Adam, watched it through Abraham, watched it through David, watched it until he came to Joseph. God marked one bloodline from the foundation of the earth until the day Jesus came. So long as that gene keeps transferring, there's a possibility for a divine project to be executed. And that's how it is for every one of us. Everyone who is here today, there was an agenda. And if you go into God's structure in the spirit, there are dimensions that can travel through certain or through bloodlines. There are dimensions that can travel through certain lineages. That's why even in the Israeli tribe, there is the Judah tribe that can handle scepters. It's not everybody who came out of Jacob that can be a king. It is a Judah that can be a king. And then you have the Issachar that have the right to the prophetic, so that they can give direction to Israel, because there are certain ordinations that are tied to bloodlines. So what God does is that when the time comes for that ordination to be transferred to the next generation, God comes upon you and puts a government that now you are about to transfer my ordination to the next dispensation. You can't just marry anybody, because there are people you marry who don't have that spiritual genetic structure to be able to host a dimension. And so you may love them, but if you marry them, you will truncate a possibility. If you marry them, you will shut down a spiritual operation. If you marry them, you will cancel out an agenda. So although God respects your feeling, God will give you a choice. If you want the prophetic to continue in this lineage, you will have to let go of your emotion, because I am writing a prophetic code, and that code passes through your DNA. And because that code passes through your DNA, there are sacrifices you must make if this lineage must continue. So when you want to marry as a kingdom agent, you will have respect for ordination, not feeling. You know, feelings can be built, but ordinations are eternal. They were crystallized from the studios of heaven. You don't have the power to create ordination. Only God has such powers. And so what God will do is that he will ensure that the right combinations come together. And it's not just about the gene, because in Christ we no longer function by biological gene. It's also about the capacity through process, capacity through training to be able to raise that child in the way of the Lord. So Proverbs 22 verse 6 said, train up a child in the way that he should go. You will read it and think it's about good character. It's not talking about good character. In the way that he should go means before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. I ordained you to be a prophet. So there are certain persons that have been trained with the capacity to raise prophets. So when you want to marry a woman who does not have the orientation to raise a prophet, and it is destined upon you to produce prophet, God will say no. Because if you marry that woman, the child will not go in the way that he should go, because the utensils for equipping is not with her. She was raised in a family where people do what they want. Everybody is a harlot, my brother. Even if she repents, the skill, it is not there. And so when God considers ordination, he will tell you, your loins, the seed of your loins were numbered from eternity. If there's one sacrifice he will make on earth, is to marry somebody who can steward it. You know, when he met Jeremiah, Jeremiah thought he was being creative. He said, no, Ordinations are not creativity. They say, before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. I was the one who occasioned the bonding process that resulted in you. And the reason I occasioned it is so that they will have enough skill to teach you how to access God and walk in your ordination. Did you not read about the patriarchs? Before anybody came, they had encounters. In Luke chapter 1, from verse 13 to verse 17, the Bible said Zacharias went into the court to prepare for the service, and while he stood, the angel appeared to him and told him, Zacharias. Look at verse 13. Let me show you some scriptures. You know, when we talk marriage, people think it's emotion. Emotion is secondary. We are talking ordination. There are certain hands that must be on deck for a prophet to be born, for an apostle to be born, for a king to be born. There are certain hands. There are certain trainings. From when the child is infant, you need a woman and a man who have the skill to talk life into that child, so that mindsets can be formed. Is it this generation where people wake up with Twitter and sleep with Twitter, that you will just marry carelessly? Meanwhile, you need a mother that when the child, when she's still pregnant, she knows when there are movements in her stomach. So in the evening, she can put her hand and begin to shape the destiny of that child from the womb. That's the kind of woman God needs for the ordination that was written through you. And then you say, no, somebody is dark and short. When your child is one, there are words he needs to hear to modify his DNA so that he can align with divine ordinance. And you need a woman that has the requisite capacity, the patience, and the spiritual intelligence to keep dishing those words, so that when that child is 7, he will have the capacity to have his first encounter. Because encounters were written that at the age of 7 he will have encounter, but he needs discernment, and he doesn't have the ability to read a book. It's the mother that will read books and talk it into his spirit, so that his senses will be sharp to pick the movement of the angel at 7. But you see, you now married a mother that is a Twitter expert. So even when that child is 20, he has not been able to build sensitivity because he was not trained in the way that he should go. I come in the volume of the books, it was written about me to do your will, oh God. I come in the volume. Rakibo Asalata Pararana Mandadira Kai. We can't charge yet. Wait. Look at this scripture. Please sit down. It said, but the angel said unto him, fear not, Zacharias. He said, for thy prayers is heard. Because there are certain children that won't come until you have raised prayers. You need prayers. So it's not like it's not that you are barren. You need prayers because you need a spiritual womb to carry that child. So God can wait for 5 years. If the man you married is not a spiritual man, he will tell you, I'm the only son. My people need a male child. Meanwhile, what they are saying is that you need a womb that is incubated with priesthood to be able to raise this king in the spirit. But the man is under pressure because his grandfather said they need a boy. And because of that, after 5 years, the man will come to you and say, you see, we have tried. It's not working. So I've decided to take a second wife. Meanwhile, it was designed that a child will come only after 5 years because you need enough incubation. It says, Zacharias, it says, your prayers have been heard. It said, thy wife, because even your wife, they know her in the spirit. Thy wife, Elizabeth, shall bear thee a son, and you shall call his name John. So you don't give names because you watch a movie and you love Nick. So many people who should bear Smith are bearing Bartholomew. People who should bear Paul are bearing Nathaniel, because they don't even know that even the name carries the signature of the ordination. But how can they pick it? When they married from emotion. He shall bear thee a son, his name shall be called John. Do you know the dramatic part of this story? He doubted the angel and he became dumb, so he didn't have the opportunity to tell Elizabeth. But the day the child was supposed to be named, elders came who thought that children is about, this is our lineage, this is our clan, and they started suggesting that the child's name should be Zacharias. Elizabeth stood up and said, no, his name is John. They said, no, nobody in this lineage has borne that name before. He said, no, his name is John. It was why they were arguing that the mouth of Zachariah opened, and he said, yes, his name is John. That means Elizabeth was not where this encounter happened, but she had the signature. She too could peep into the destiny of the child. So the reason they qualify to be husband and wife is because both of them can read the destiny of the children that they born. The reason John became a great prophet was because they married correctly. I was preaching in Zambia when God told me my first son will be called Moses. I wrote it down and left. 1 month to the time, my wife now was suggesting to me in reverence what I think about the name Moses. I said, why you say Moses? She said, that's what she heard. I said, now I know you are qualified to be a mother. Because one of the signs that I married correctly is the fact that she was able to pick it. So now, even if I leave my son for my wife alone for 10 years, I won't be afraid. He can fulfill his destiny. Because she had the power to see and to hear on matters of his ordination. Go and read the Bible. You will find out that most of the great men that the Bible took time to write, their mothers had encounters in the spirit. From Samuel, there was an encounter. To Samson, there was an encounter, and that's how it continued. So the reason they are able to steward those destinies and to birth those giants was because they knew their ordination. And so you meet a man who has no power in the spirit, you meet a woman who has no power in the spirit, you are marrying because of sheep. It may take another 50 to 100 years before God visits that bloodline again. That's why you come to certain families, darkness will rule for 80 years. Darkness will rule for 100 years because there are no stewards. There are no custodians. Too many dislocations happen. And it will take God 100 years again to begin to connect the clan. The clan. It will take time because maybe it is great-grandchildren of different lines that God will finally go and connect again to realign the design of ordination. Ordinations are born through marriage. Divine heritages are preserved through marriage. That's the first mystery of marriage. And so when God created Adam and Eve, God knew that Jesus will come from there. And it will not just come from anyone. It will come through the one that births Abraham, through the one that births David, and through the one that births Joseph. Because Abraham represents father, David represents king. Jesus must be king and father. And for that to happen, the algorithm must be correct. If they fail, manipulations will happen until it's gotten right.
When you hold my hands, everything becomes possible.